Hey y'all, Brown here, and so I just wanted to do a quick little follow-up to the review I most recently did for the first volume of the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider series. And there were some things I'd accidentally left out of my initial review, and I just wanted to touch on those real quick. But first off, I wanted to talk a little more about the two-part storyline, which was in issues 5 and 6 of the Ghost Rider series, in which Ghost Rider and Punisher, had an initial scuffle with one another, and then they ended up teaming up against Flag Smasher and Ultimatum. And so I actually think it's a pretty cool story, and the conflict, as in Ghost Rider and Punisher being at odds in the first place, actually makes some sense. But seeing as how this particular Ghost Rider is someone new on the scene and no one's ever encountered him before, and so Punisher not knowing who he was made some sense, and Ghost Rider not necessarily knowing who Punisher was, except for what he vaguely remembered from Danny Ketch's memories or something along those lines, made some sense as well. And so while it is a bit of a stretch to have both characters thinking that the other's involved with the gun running scheme that Ultimatum's ultimately behind, I think that at the very least the two of them being at odds made some sense. And as well as when the two of them both realize that, hey, we're actually on the same side here, we're going after the same guys, why don't we team up? That made sense as well. And I did like how when Punisher and Ghost Rider were initially right before they start to fight each other, Punisher gets a genuine oh shit moment wherein he's on a rooftop with a sniper rifle, or he's got a scope on his rifle, and he's taking a look at what's going on below him with this assembly, and then he across the way he sees Ghost Rider, and he'd heard about him, but this is the first time seeing him in action. And so he takes aim with his rifle, but he's trying to basically see what this Ghost Rider is, with the scope. And so right then and there, Ghost Rider just looks right at Punisher, and Punisher's like, wait a minute, there's no way he can possibly see me. And next thing he knows, there's this trail of flames coming right at him, which is Ghost Rider's motorcycle charging up the building that Frank is on, and Frank just barely has time to get out his weapon and start trying to take pot shots at Ghost Rider. But I thought that moment was actually pretty cool, like the way it was illustrated, in panel to panel. It made it look like a rather cinematic moment. And like I said, it's probably one of the few times in the 90s that I can think of where Frank Castle has a genuine oh shit moment, But then when it gets to Ghost Rider and Punisher teaming up, I like how they actually, it's not necessarily a reluctant team up. It's more along the lines of, hey, we're literally on the same side here. It makes sense that we're fighting together against Flag Smasher and his goons. And so you even have Castle kind of playing good cop at where Ghost Rider's playing bad cop. And which is kind of a change of pace, if you know the Punisher stories. But like when they're interrogating people, that is. And so and also liked Ghost Rider's use of the penance stare against Flag Smasher, because it's a very simple moment of horror, but you see courtesy of artists Javier Saltrez and Mark Texeria, you see Ghost Rider giving Flag Smasher the penance stare, and and he's basically saying this is anarchy, which is what Flag Smasher and his forces are constantly striving for, except what they thought was anarchy and what Ghost Rider thinks of as anarchy are two different things, and it's too much for Flag Smasher to handle. And so basically his mind is just in turmoil, and we get all that from just a couple of panels, and it's a great moment. But unfortunately, there's this bit where Punisher, like, he's about to take advantage of the moment and blow Flag Smasher's head off, and then Ghost Rider stops him, saying that he fights for vengeance, and he's asking Punisher, what does he fight for? And so then the police come along, and so Punisher and Ghost Rider flee the scene together. But one of the things that annoyed me about that moment, though, not about the story, but about that moment, was the fact that in the issues prior to 5 and 6, Ghost Rider had no problem whatsoever with severely injuring, the criminals he went after, and even outright killed some of them. And we're talking, like, this is a guy who's got spikes on his arms, and he's got spikes on, where his knuckles are as well. And you clearly see him, basically, going all in on, the criminals when he's punching them. And in some instances, like, you even see blood flying. And so, as strong as Ghost Rider is, I mean, even when it's not outright stated, that the guys who are, hit by Ghost Rider, especially, when it comes to the spikes, I mean, they're not getting up again. Or if they are, they're going to be in the hospital for a long time. And then, of course, you have Ghost Rider, using his chain, to basically, as a kind of this dispenser of makeshift shurikens, because when he uses his chain, one of the things he's able to do is make it disassemble, and each chain link, as it flies towards its target, turns into this sort of spiked weapon, or a spiked chain link. And we clearly see the chain links, go through a lot of the people that Ghost Rider's going after. And it's not like all out gore fest, but it's like you see the silhouette, but you clearly see the chain, going into and out of, the other side. And so even Frank Castle alludes to, some of the people that, he and Ghost Rider, took a shot at when they were going up against Ultimatum. He even admits that, some of these people aren't getting up. And so when a killer like Frank Castle is saying that, yeah, this other guy definitely killed these people, then, okay, that Ghost Rider killed people. And so I didn't have a problem with that, because, I mean, in my mind, if you're going to make a character that, fearsome looking, especially with spikes, I mean, you may as well, go all in on, how these spikes, affect the other party, as it were. So basically, if Ghost Rider's hitting you at full speed and full strength, with a spike, filled glove, then yeah, you're not going to be getting up from that one. I mean, that's just, reality, within a fictional setting, of course. But so when you have that moment where, I mean, following up the great moment of Ghost Rider using his penance stare on Flag Smasher, and then you followed it up with, this random bit of, I don't, fight for, he's basically saying that, he doesn't, just go out and kill people, when in fact he just did, a couple of issues beforehand. And so, him saying, I fight for vengeance, what do you fight for? To Frank Castle, I mean, it's more than a little hypocritical. And it's one of those moments where, I mean, as much as I like the story, it's that moment, unfortunately, stands out like a sore thumb. And I'm kind of left wondering, is this something that was editorially mandated? Because up until this point in this particular story, Ghost Rider literally had no problem with, killing or otherwise maiming, people, and in terms of, the criminals he went after. So for him to suddenly just do a 180 just kind of out of the blue with no development whatsoever, I mean, I know that Howard Mackie, I mean, as much as, I like him, I mean, he does have his issues as a writer, just like any other, writer does, but he is good at, I mean, he was doing a good job of, basically establishing Ghost Rider as this, fierce, demonic entity that happened to fight crime. And so, for him to, just do this 180 with no prior development whatsoever, I mean, it's definitely stands out in a way to where you're kind of like, okay, was this something that was straight up Howard Mackey's mistake, or was this something that is editorially mandated? Like, did someone from on high say, yeah, we don't want this guy running around killing people. It's too impressionable. So yeah, we want you to change it up a bit, to where he's not so bloodthirsty, even though he's covered in spikes. So it's just one of those moments that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, like I said, the story itself is good. It just, that moment though, was, it definitely brought the story down some, in my opinion. But I will say, I think that this moment could have been salvaged if the story in question, specifically the story that took place in issues 5 and 6, had happened further on down the road within the series. Like, let's say, for example, the last couple of issues in this volume happened to be this two-part, Ghost Rider and Punisher story, instead of the cobbled together, resolution to the missing children arc and the introduction of Zodiac. I mean, as good as the Zodiac story is, I mean, the fact that it ended on a cliffhanger was kind of annoying. But then if they had the Punisher and Ghost Rider story at, say, like after the Zodiac story, I think that, this narrative would make much more sense. As in, Ghost Rider's decision to stop Punisher from killing Flag Smasher would have made more sense, because at this point in the series, as in, around issues, 8, 9, and 10, Ghost Riders, or I should, let me phrase that, around issues 9 and 10 specifically, Ghost Rider's really beginning to, question his, mission, and, he's also, been shown on a couple of occasions that he needs to prioritize actually saving the innocent as opposed to just avenging them. And so, if those stories had happened before the Punisher and Ghost Rider storyline, then Ghost Rider's decision to prevent Frank Castle from killing Flag Smasher would have made more sense. I mean, I think that, there could have been some writing to further establish, Ghost Rider's mindset, like his internal dialogue and what have you. I mean, that would have helped as well. But just in terms of having, those two the story that took place in those two issues, had those two issues been, placed at the end of this collection, I think that particular moment would have been more impactful, and it would have made more sense in terms of Ghost Rider's character development, because as it is, that moment being, thrown in as early in the series as it was, right after Ghost Rider had just, turned a bunch of guys to shish kebab, I mean, it doesn't make sense. And so, once again, I think that, that two-parter is actually a pretty cool story, both, in terms of, Ghost Rider and Punisher initially fighting each other, as well as, their team up against Flag Smasher and Ultimatum, because you get some really badass action scenes. I mean, you see plenty of shots of Ghost Rider's motorcycle literally, riding up buildings on a trail of fire, which is a pretty badass sight. And, of course, having the Punisher, old school Punisher in on the scene, in this type of story, in this dark setting, actually is pretty cool too, so, yeah, all in all, I thought it was a good two-part story. I just, like I said, I think that, it would have been better had it been, further on down in this series, or at least, within this collection. So, yeah, like I said, I just wanted to throw that out there. And I don't remember if I said it for sure, but when it comes to the character of Blackout, his motivation for, basically going rogue and, swiping the containers of toxin or toxic gas, his whole motivation was, he was convinced that, once the gas was dispensed or dispersed, then over a certain area in New York City, then the authorities were going to be thinking that it was a terrorist attack or something, and then inevitably there'd be some form of nuclear warfare. And in this nuclear winter that would come after the nuclear explosions, someone like Blackout could in his mind be a king in this hellish new world, because his power more or less comes from darkness. And so when you have nuclear winter and no electricity, well, Blackout would essentially be the one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind. And so I don't remember for sure if I actually touched on that when I was talking about that particular storyline in my initial review, but just on the off chance I didn't, there you go. That was Blackout's motivation. So I did appreciate that, considering when that particular story was written, which was in 1990, this was kind of like when the Cold War was just kind of dying down, but at the same time there was still a tension in the air. And so talk of nuclear warfare and nuclear winter was not out of place, in terms of what was going on in the world at the time that this story was written. So anyway, yeah, those were my additional thoughts on the Ghost Rider collection, the Danny Ketch Classic Volume 1. And so I would say, if you haven't had a chance to check out my review for that volume, definitely check that out. But if you've already checked that one out and you're just now checking out what I'm saying here, well, hey, this makes more sense. So, but anyway, I hope you guys have a good day, and if you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe. And but yeah, take care. Bye.